Hello, good evening, everybody. So, I have my brother Nick joining me this evening from Edinburgh in Scotland.
Hi
So,
everyone.
Nick is in his bubble with wife Pam and two kids, Freddie and Rebecca. And I did have to, well, I didn't have to. Nick had to have a little bit of a Google to understand what the word yarn meant, because apparently that's a bit of a Kiwi slang. Didn't know that one before, hey?
I, I thought it was something to do with knitting. Sorry.
So Nick is now. Remind me what you do. I can never remember the title of your job. What is it?
I'm a chartered surveyor, basically. Do valuation work, property.
Yep, live just outside Edinburgh.
Yep. So I live in a little village called Ratho, on the canal. There's a little village pub 3 minutes from my door. It's pretty awesome.
Very important. Cool. So, apart from that, though, you're a bit of an adventurer, really. Hey, supposedly.
Well, I try to be. I sort of fit it in, dip in and out, between jobs and that sort of thing. So yeah, when I can be.
Okay, so the reason I've got you on tonight is to talk about your Rockall expedition, which was back in 2014.
Yep.
And you broke what the two world records by doing that, yes?
Yeah, so there were two occupation records. There was a solo occupation record, which was set in the 80s by an ex-SAS soldier, Tom McLean, which was 40
Mm-hmm.
days. And then there was a group record, which was set by Greenpeace in the early 90s, and that was 45 days. And sorry, 43 days. And I broke both of those.
Fantastic. So can you tell everybody a little bit more about Rockall? Because everybody in New Zealand certainly probably won't understand Rockall, how far it is from where, because it's just a big rock in the ocean, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially, I mean, people kind of, when you start talking about it, people think it's some lovely little desert island out in the middle of the ocean, but it is essentially just a big rock. It's about 20 meters across at the bottom, it's 15 meters high. Most of it's almost vertical. There's a couple of little ledges, Hall's Ledge, where I put my shelter, and then the top's flat because the Royal Engineers blew the top off it to put a navigation light on it. And there's nothing there really. Some seaweed, lots of birds, a couple of seals, some whales, and you're about 250 miles out into the North Atlantic. So if anyone
Kilometers?
knows, sorry,
Kilometers?
don't have to convert that. Google it, Google it. But yeah, there's an island group, an archipelago called St Kilda off the Outer Hebrides, which most people seem to think is the edge of the world before you hit America. But this is
Yeah.
another 200 miles further out.
So before you, Ben Fogel had tried to get on as well, but couldn't even get onto the island. Was that right?
Yeah, Ben Fogel went out as part of he was writing a book called The Tea Time Islands, and he tried to go out and land on Rockall. He got there, and he had a similar issue to me on one of my recce's, but the swell was too high. So he managed to touch the rock and he stuck a post-it to it, calling it Ben's Rock. But that was the end of his expedition.
Okay, so um, I know because I was obviously back in England when you did this record, but I know a lot of people at the time were kind of like, "What? Why? Like, what is the theory behind sitting on a rock?" And I know at the time you always said, "Like, if you're going to ask me this question, you kind of don't understand." But it was very much a sort of psychological challenge, wasn't it, for you to put you in that level of isolation that there just was nothing else but you, the rock, and the weather.
Yeah, I suppose personally it was a couple of things. So I'd run a couple of ultra marathons. I did the Marathon des Sables and a double marathon, and I'd climbed Kilimanjaro and Elbrus, two of the seven summits.
Mhm.
And I was just looking for my own project really to call my own. And I was thinking about going to Antarctica, but everybody seems to do that these days. So I was looking at a really long sea kayak journey, came up upon some stories about Rockall, and saw that there were these two records that could be broken, or I thought they could be broken, and naively thought I'd plan this expedition in a couple of years and tick that box. but yeah, for me, it was really a mental challenge. The only real physical side was the actual initial landing and getting all my supplies and the shelter onto the rock. And after that, it was just being on my own for 45 days with no physical human contact.
Hmm. And so you lived in a water tank that you converted. How big was that?
So it was about 8 foot long, which is what, just probably 2.5 meters, something like that. So
Mm.
I'm 5'7". I could stretch out in it, but I also had all my water supply in there with me and all my electronic equipment. So I had a wind turbine on the rock, so the battery pack and inverter were there in there, and I had a
Mm.
laptop in there to allow me to communicate. So it was pretty squashed, but there was just enough space for me.
Water tanks in the UK are shallow, aren't they? Because over here they're really, really deep. But I mean, could you sit up fully in it or not?
Well, I mean, we have the deep ones as well, but this one was specifically designed for going on the back of a trailer, so it was low
Right.
profile. And I could just sit up, but not straight. I would be hunched over like this
Mm.
with my access hatch pretty much touching my head.
Yeah.
Um, so if the weather was nice, I was either out of the pod or I had the hatch open and the pod rim came to kind of my nose, so I could peek out.
Mm.
But otherwise, yeah, it was pretty squished place to be.
So what did you take from that, like psychologically? Did you have to have a routine? Was there certain exercise things that you needed to do to keep you sort of happy and sane? Like what kept you sane and got you through that whole 45 days of complete solo isolation?
Well, a big part of my planning was preparing for the mental side of it. Like many people, I've got a little bit of a dark dog on the shoulder sometimes. And, you know, if
Mm.
you try and spend too much time on your own and you start to sort of internalize too much, you can get to quite a dark place and feel quite lonely. And I wanted to
Mm.
avoid any possibility of that happening. And I had the opportunity, obviously, to plan for this, which coming into lockdown, none of us have had really.
Mm.
But for me, it was about routine and about keeping myself as busy as possible in such a remote location. So there's
Mm.
obviously a finite number of things you can do on a small rock when you've only got
Yeah.
the size of a dining table to walk about on when the weather is good. But so what I did was I broke down my day into pieces and made
Mm.
sure I didn't do anything concurrently. So good example is in the mornings when I'm getting ready for work. Normally now I'll be sort of half dressed, drinking my coffee, shouting at the kids, making sure the dog's gone out, all these sort of things at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
But what I did at Rockall was I would get up, then I would get dressed and I would do all these things slowly. Then I would make a cup of tea. Then I would have my breakfast. And suddenly, something that I do now in about half an hour would take me an hour and a half. So
Mm.
that's now
Yeah.
half of my build straight away. Then I would go and do my exercise routine, which would, you know, one of your previous speakers was talking about your mental health being reinforced by your physical health.
Mm.
Uh, and I felt that was really important. And I had to stay strong anyway, because I had to be able to either self-rescue or get myself and my gear off the rock at the end of the
Yeah.
expedition. So there
Yeah.
was another motivation for that. And then I found lots of tasks to do. So I did a lot of drawing. I did a lot of measuring of the rock and taking rock samples and that sort of thing. Obviously not directly relatable to now, but if you can find little day-to-day tasks, and what I'm doing at the moment, being in lockdown with the kids, as well as having to try and educate the kids and play with them and do normal daily chores, is I quite often find myself walking around the house going, that's a job I've been meaning to do for about 18 months. I'll do it now because I've got the time.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another time it's taken up, you know. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is about time management and keeping yourself busy and not getting to the point where you're sitting there feeling lonely. And we have technology now which helps, so we can talk to people like you on the other side of the planet,
Yeah.
not to feel lonely. And I think we need to use all these resources that are available to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously got the two kids at home and Pam. Have you got kind of exercise and activity stuff that you guys are doing each day?
Yeah, well, every morning, I don't know if you've heard of it. There's this guy, Joe Wicks, who's doing PE for the world
Okay.
on YouTube. So he was like an online physical education guy on YouTube, just doing his thing. And then he suddenly decided he was going to be the PE teacher for the nation, for the UK during the lockdown. Anyway,
Okay.
he's gone global and he's been on CNN, and he's people in Japan and South Africa and South America watching him. So he does this half an hour's PE for you and the kids every morning. Now,
Oh,
admittedly,
fantastic.
some mornings it's just me and Pam, and the kids are just sitting on the sofa laughing at us. But again, it's become part of our family routine. It gives us a
Yeah.
deadline. He's on at 9, so the kids have to be up, dressed, breakfasted, teeth cleaned, bed made, ready to do Joe Wicks at 9, and then we all do Joe Wicks at 9. And it's worth a little Google if anyone's looking for some easy
Yeah.
exercises to do. And he's really good fun and really light-hearted. So yeah, that sort of starts
Yeah,
our
that's
day,
cool.
all energized.
So I've asked everybody else that I've chatted to for 3 things that they've become very aware that they're grateful for during this time of lockdown. What would be your 3 things that have come to mind for you?
First thing's time. I spend my entire working life thinking that I'm time poor. I don't have time to do little jobs, don't have time to spend with the kids, don't have time to walk the dog. Now I've got a lot of time and I'm loving
Yeah.
it. And I don't have to do something with the kids quickly because I've got something else to do. I can sit and spend time with it. I can go for a nice long country walk in the fields behind us. I can just go and sit in the garden and listen to the birds if the mood takes me, which I just didn't have
Yeah.
the opportunity to do before. So
Yeah.
time's definitely one. We've been really blessed. I mean, this is Scotland. This time of year, it'd probably be sideways sleet or something normally, but since
Yeah.
lockdown, it has been the best spring we've ever had. It's been warm,
Yeah.
sunny winds, and that's just again enabled us to get outside and do more. So when we're in lockdown with the kids, if we were just stuck in the house, it would be an absolute nightmare. So really, really pleased for the weather at the moment. And then I suppose, and I know you told me not to say this, but
Well,
family.
no, just everybody says family, which is fair enough. At least we are
Yeah,
appreciative.
but it is, again, spending time, quality time with the children, which uh, putting a slightly different angle on it and to make people think our parents and our grandparents never had this opportunity, to
Yeah.
spend potentially 3 months with your children. Look at it as an opportunity. Look at it as a
Mm.
time to build that relationship. They'll remember this. You'll
Yeah, they,
remember this, obviously, because it's hard work. But it's, look at it as an opportunity rather than a curse.
yeah,
It's brilliant time. Brilliant time.
yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much for those 3 things.
That's right.
Um, so Fred's around somewhere. Is he hiding behind the camera, or is he
No, gone off to play on
gone
his
away? So before this, he was bouncing in and out of the camera, and I was like, I'm so going to see Fred in and out of the camera the whole time. So that's very, very well behaved. Cool. So if anybody wants to look up your Rockall expedition, where would they go to have a look at the rock and what you did and everything else?
Well, you can either go onto my website, nicholashancock.com, or just Google Rockall and Nick Hancock, and there's a billion images on there, and there's lots of newspaper reports and links to news articles and stuff like that.
Yeah. I have to say, like, even though obviously I was there and knew you were doing it, when you look at the photographs, it's completely nuts that you stayed on that rock for 45 days. And it does kind of put everything into perspective right now of how much connection and availability of actually the world is still so easy for us to access right now, even though we are in isolation. So it must seem quite easy for you right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm not sort of consciously reflecting on that experience, but I'm obviously using it day to day. And, I couldn't imagine doing this lockdown 20 years ago, pre-internet. It would be an
Yeah.
absolute nightmare.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
Nice to speak to my little sister for once.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye.